Terry.
Hey guys, my name's Terry. I'm Attic. Thank you, Paige. We are on the bottom of 52, right? The Wright brothers?
Absolutely. You're right about that, brother. That was stupid. Over
Good.
to you.
Thanks, Paige. All right. So this Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Think of a child, and they have childlike faith or childish faith. What's the Paige, do you have the definition of childlike and childish? If you could
Oh,
find that, that'd be
I will
great.
have
Yeah.
a look, see. Absolutely.
But like you look at a kid, I remember when I was 4 or 5 years old, like I'll jump on the monkey bars, jump off, jump off anything basically. I know that I possibly get hurt, but I got faith that I could do it anyway. Like I did some wild stuff when I was a little kid because I had faith I could. Right? I thought I was what you could call invincible, right? But that was the mainspring of their accomplishment that they had this childish faith that, you know what, we're going to try this out, keep an open mind, let's rock and roll. And what happened, it actually works, right? And we learned about Professor Langley, and right, and his machine going to the bottom of the Potomac, and then everyone's like, nah, no one's ever going to fly because Professor Langley didn't do it. Then look at these cats down in North Carolina at Kitty Hawk. They made it happen. Because of what? Childish faith or childlike faith. That's why I'm going to ask Paige to look up the definition of those two. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self, another, it's another reference to our thinking, right? Our thinking life, thought life, self-sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us, they didn't tell us, they just showed us by being a demonstration of what it looks like to have God in their life. So this God sufficiency worked in them. We began to feel that those who insisted the Wright brothers would never fly. This idea that I would stick to self-sufficiency in order to self-will my way into recovery or self-will my way through the steps or self-will my way through getting sober or self-will my way into happiness or self-will my way into joy or self-will my way into freedom. I always kind of fell short. I just always kind of missed it. But I saw that other people were using this God sufficient thing and they were stepping from bridge to shore. And I did not like that. I, I would just judge them instead. And then all of a sudden I would have a closed mind. It's funny that my dad, I don't know why this popped up, but I was in rehab and they asked, we did like a little counseling session with my dad and individually with my dad and also individually with my mom. And they asked my dad, what would you like your son to gain out of his experience in this rehab? And he says, I want him to be self-sufficient. And I'm thinking about that as I look through this is, yes, easy talking about me being self-sufficient, living a life without God in my life and taking care of my bills and this and that. I don't think that's exactly what he meant. I think he wanted me to be completely dependent in order to live happy and free all the time. And there was a missing piece to that was that did not have God in my life at that time. And thank God that I was so beaten up and so mangled when I got in here. It actually helped me to create an open mind towards possibly something that there's out there that could help me. Yes, today I live on self-sufficiency. You know, I contribute to my own wellness. I contribute to my family. I'm not dependent upon mommy. My dad is no longer here, so I can't say dad. I'm no longer dependent on people in order to live. I'm no longer dependent upon a job in order to feel okay. I'm no longer dependent upon money in order to feel okay or to live. These are all things and learning curves that happened to me during recovery that I had to learn through repeated humiliation. There's a lot of old things from the old personality pops up when you go through this journey, you could say. And a lot of that needs to be destroyed because it's blocking me off from power. You know? And when we agnostics were looking at this God sufficiency worked in others, and it worked in, you could see it's working in me. I'm still sober today. That's crazy. Right? There's only a few people that have seen me outright mental defective that go to Zoom. You know? One of them's Tony. You guys know him, Tony. Yeah. And people, you know what people would say? Like they would say to me, "We thought you were a goner. We thought you were gonna die." You know, I don't ever, I don't ever sell sh God short anymore. Yeah. I really don't. You know, God has just performed miracles in my life, and you're looking at one who has been transformed and changed because I live a life of God sufficiency. And because of that, my outside material things chase me now, which never made sense to me. So, yeah, back to you, Paige. PPP.
Awesome. All right. So I looked up in my 1930s dictionary. They didn't have childlike, but they had childish, which was not the most helpful definition. It said like a child. But it also had the interesting definition of puerile, which, ooh, so I was off on a little like I was down in the P's, gonna check that out. And then puerile is childlike or juvenile. So it wasn't the most helpful or interesting rabbit hole, but we went on it. So off we go. And if you guys were here last week, you would have heard me go on and on and on and on about Professor Langley. Oh, I do a whole like 30-minute talk on Professor Langley. But the thrust of the metaphor of the Wright brothers is this idea that we were convinced, as Terry was saying, Professor Langley, he had all the money, all the resources, all the like backing of the United States military, and he was going to be the guy to make the airplane. And it crashes into the Potomac, and we're like, no, dude, man could never fly. And these bicycle repairmen get an airplane going for like 7 seconds, and we change our mind. Now, what that looks like for us today in 2025 in step two, I don't have my own airplane. I don't. I don't have an airplane, but all I need to believe is that airplanes exist. That's what we're trying to do here. Believe that airplanes exist. And I point out that it would be a little uncool to show up to like JFK or the airport in Calgary's YYC, to show up at the airport and just gaslight the employees, like, I know that you think an airplane works for you. I know you really believe in it, but it's just not for me. I don't think it's you know what I mean? That there are people that are flying, and that's Terry. Somebody who has recovered, the light is on. He's a miraculous, a powerful demonstration. Now, what I need to do in step two is just believe that exists. I don't have that. And we talk about that childish faith. And as Terry was talking about, like being a little kid jumping off everything, it was reminding me of this metaphor of faith that I have. And before the meeting, we were talking about nieces and nephews and grandnieces and grandnephews. And I've got a niece and a nephew. And it has been absolutely one of the privileges of my sobriety to be a part of their lives. And my nephew just got his like learner's permit, which is terrifying. So much empathy for the parents out there. But when they were toddlers, they would both do this thing. And if you've had kids or had kids in your life, you might recognize this thing. And it is where they get on the furniture a little bit too high, like they climb up a little bit too high. And then you hear something and it sounds a little like, Auntie Paige, catch. And then they jump and they will do that again and again and again. And I gotta be, because I was able to, my stomach could handle coffee then. So at the time I had to be like, whoa, don't drop the toddler, don't spill the coffee. And that is the order. The gifts of sobriety is because if I wasn't sober, there might have been a different order about that. But they would do that leap of faith again and again and again. And why were they able to do that with such complete abandon? Well, my experience is because they had never been dropped. And we don't know this when we take the leap of faith that is these 12 steps out of this book. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to trust that Terry's never been dropped. I'm going to trust that Eileen, 17 years today, has never been dropped. She's like, you're dropping me now, Paige. Don't do that. But that their experience is real. And again, I'm seeing that what I have is not working. And I'm seeing people who are happy, sober at the same time. How could I deny that there is a power? I don't need to like the power, define the power, understand the power. I just need to believe that there is one. And so, top of page 53, what we're doing, what I like, Terry has the EIEIOs. I like to call it the spiritual judo or spiritual jujitsu because I can't remember what the letters stand for. I mean to write it down and then I forget, and Terry's going to tell us because he's on it. Uh, and so, with the next paragraph, we're doing what I like to call the spiritual jujitsu. So, we are taking our like difficulties, our barriers to belief in God, our resistance, and we're using that resistance and turning it on its head and going to have a new experience. So this is the argument of it's just not logical. I can't give up my logic. Well, let's see what happens. It says logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. We're not asking you to give up your logic. It is not by chance that we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. So, one of the most incredible things about us as human beings is that we are given the power to examine the evidence of our senses, to be given the ability to given the ability to see what is working, logic, like to use logic to draw conclusions. Like that is part of being a human being. And it says, we agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pain. So it's like we're begging you to tell you why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. And so, what are we talking about? I'm sticking to this idea that this higher power, that's not logical. That's not reasonable. That's not based in logic or reason. And me not believing in one, that is based in logic and reason. But let's take a moment and examine the evidence of our senses. Is the evidence of our senses that I keep freaking relapsing? And even if I'm sober, that I want to die the whole time? Like this logic that I'm holding on to, it's soft and mushy, it's not producing the results. My way of thinking, there could be no power, there is no God, I can't trust God. Well, if I look at the logic, what I've got going on for me is not working. It's illogical. It is illogical to continue as I am doing, especially at this point in the book when we have already had a step one experience. And that step one experience is that I'm going to relapse. I'm going to relapse. A relapse is coming. It is inevitable and it is imminent. And there are people who have been in my predicament and they have recovered. There is a light on in their eyes. There is a hope in their spirit. They wear the world like a loose garment. They are sober and happy and useful. And I'm like, but I don't want to believe in that. I mean, that's not logical. Like, that's what it's saying. So that's the spiritual judo, spiritual jujitsu. So we're flipping that logic on its head. And again, when it talks about we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. I mean, that's where we're at. Do I have a better way? And I'll be honest with you, if we have a better way, I think hanging out with Terry's the best. But most of us are not going to be hanging out with me if we got a better way. Do you know what I'm saying? I always tell my sponsees, I'm the last refuge of the truly desperate. You got to be out of options before asking me for help. Some of y'all know. You know, I don't know. I don't got a better way. Well, we have one. Let's just take this course of action and just believe that this solution exists. Over to Terry. Pew pew.
Thanks, Paige. I like that line where it says, we agnostically inclined. I am an agnostically inclined individual. Most of my life, I've lived it based on self-will. I asked you guys to do a spiritual exercise or some homework or Yet again, we could read and study this book all day, but it's not about learning, it's about becoming. And then when you become this way of life, you start to be this way of life. And we got to look at our former thinking. Remember, we looked at the six barriers for spiritual growth that are caused from our thinking, being stubborn, obstinacy, unreasoning prejudice, tradition, all sorts of fixed ideas. What did you write down? What was your experience with that? Are those old ideas holding you back to the point where you say, I don't know. I don't know what to do anymore. It's yet again, this whole chapter is overturning objections or judo, just like Paige is talking about. And they're getting to this paragraph, which changed my life. This is a change your life paragraph, and this is my experience with it. So I'll read it, kind of dissect it a little bit, and talk more about my experience. And hopefully, we don't take the whole damn hour to talk about this paragraph because we can, right, Peter? So it says, when we became alcoholics, well, I thought I was born one. I guess that kind of says I became one. When did I become an alcoholic? Some people could have that genetic gene. Some people could have trauma. Some people this and that. I don't know. I'm not in that debate. When did I become an alcoholic? When I lost the ability to choose whether I'm going to drink or not. When I lost the power to choice. Remember, we looked at from page 1 to 20, or doctor's opinion, to 23, how I lost control. Then we looked at our where we lost our choice from 23 to 43. And now we're looking at our where we lost power in pages we agnostics. When did I lose the ability to choose whether I'm going to drink or not? When did I become an alcoholic? That's when. I don't know what day or what time or what minute I crossed that threshold. All I know is I became aware of it when I started reading this book, and it started to look as a book of mirrors. I started to see myself and relate my experience to it. I can't teach you step one. I can't teach you pain. That's your experience and yours alone, right? So it says, when we became an alcoholic, crushed, crushed. I have a sponsee who says you ever crush a marble. Yeah, that's basically what happens. We get crushed into tiny little pieces by what? Self-imposed crisis. Self, the narrative, the story, the minion, the talker, the liar, that little Romeo, that little Rambo, the Xena in your head, that's a talker. Self-imposed crisis. I did it to me based on my thinking. There's a few lines in the big book that talk about stuff that's been self-imposed, and look at it through a positive attribute. And I want to challenge you guys to do this. Do you believe that you're a deliberate manufacturer of your own misery? Do you believe that all your troubles are basically your own making? Do you believe all your issues are self-imposed? Now, if you believe in that and you look at the positive attribute of that, there's tremendous freedom in that. That means none of your issues are outside coming in, they're inside coming out. Imagine walking around not worried about what people think, say, and do. The world could be on fire and you're happy, happy as pie, right? Because I have a new attitude and God has entered into my heart and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. Self-imposed crisis. I did it to me. I could not postpone or evade, which I tried to do. We had to fearlessly face. Fearless, I believe the definition of fearless means without fear. If you could give me the definition of fearlessly, that'd be great. Fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else God is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is your choice to be? I like that word be, not do, to be. And I remember I was sitting in this coffee shop, and it's called Caribou. It's in Minnesota. And I didn't know where I was at in Minnesota when I was asked this question. And my sponsor, uh, he asked me this question, and I've asked this question sometimes to some people when I take them through the work, depending on where they're at. And my sponsor at the time, he leaned over. He's like, "Can you explain God?" You guys could write that down. Can you explain God? And you know what I said? I said, "Hell yeah, I can explain." I've only met one person who has responded the way that I have. And yeah, I like that guy. I still talk to him. And this is what I said: God is love. God is girly direction. God is the great outdoors. God is a group of drunks. God is this. God is that. God is this. And I started to get tongue-tied. And I'm still trying to explain everything. And my sponsor leans over. He's like, "Hey, Terry, it's pretty hard to explain everything." It's like, because God is everything and everything's God and you're not God. And right then and there, I had a revelatory experience. I was rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence I couldn't even dream. See, God can't be explained, but he could be experienced. I'll say that one more time for everyone to write it down. God can't be explained, but he could be experienced. Right. And that my whole life, I mean, I got sober at 33. For as long as I remember, up till 33 years old, I lived in the world of the intellect, in the world of the thinker, in the world of the minion, the liar, the talker in my head. And just like Bill did, that icy intellectual mountain that I lived and shivered in, it started to melt away. I had a release in that moment, like a straight up release, not outside coming in, inside bursting out, right? It came out of me in that moment. I had a spiritual experience on step two. I didn't have to wait until step 12. I didn't have to wait until step 4, 5, 6, 7 on two. This changed my life forever because this guy showed me how I was living in the world of the intellect by explaining everything to him, and I couldn't do it. And it rocked me. It rocked me. Here's a spiritual exercise, and I'll pass it along the page. You guys could write this down. This is something that you could do today or tonight. So if God is everything, that also means he is in the nothing. So go find God or go seek God in everything you do. Go seek God in everything you do for the rest of this evening and all day tomorrow. And here are some questions you're going to answer. What is God showing me? What is God teaching me? What is God telling me? What is God doing for me in this situation? I mean, go find God while you're at work. Especially if you don't like going to work, go find God while you're at work. Go find God while you're doing the dishes. And I hate doing the dishes. I did them an hour ago and I can't stand them, but that's the best place for me to go find God, especially when I'm disturbed. Self-imposed crisis. Go find God. Go find God when you're driving. Go find God while you're stuck in traffic. Go find God while you're waiting online at the airport for 2 or 3 hours, right? Paige is always online at an airport, right? Go find God in everything that you do. And then what will happen is you'll have an awareness or an experience, and you'll have a realization right here, right now, that God has always been there. You're just awake to it now. So this spiritual exercise is to help you wake up on a moment-to-moment basis. Try and live it and write down your experience. Thank you. Back to you, Paige. PPP.
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you. I love watching for the presence of God wherever I go. And as Terry called me out, because I love watching for God at the airport. Also listening to varieties of religious experience because I'm fun. And so I did look up the word fearless in my 1930s dictionary, and it led me just the definition of intrepid. Now, I didn't get a chance to look up the 1930s definition of intrepid, but I do know just from using weird language that means to have that courage, that bravery. And so fearless, without fear, taking that leap of faith. And I love that Terry's like this part of the book. Oh man, it starts off a little rude. A self-imposed crisis, calling me out for my own behavior. How dare you? But that I couldn't postpone it, I couldn't evade it. Now, this question for me, this becomes the second step proposition. Another way to say this is step two, part two. Now I'm gonna do the share screen. And so step two, part one, we saw on page 47. See, step two is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. First and foremost, I need to believe, could there be a power that is greater than myself? Well, on page 47, it said, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power that is greater than myself? That's step two, part one. Could there be a power, right? And I just admitted whatever is bringing us to this all-inclusive study, that thing is kicking my butt. That's a power that's greater than me. So it makes sense there would be another. But step two, part two, is that this power could restore us to sanity. Step 2, part 2. And right here, this is a big question, right? Listen, I just believe there might be a power, and I kind of was open to the idea that maybe my life sucked enough that I'm open to needing some help. You know what I mean? That's where I was. And now you're asking me to answer this God is everything or else not God is nothing? Like, whoa, that's a heavy question. I'm trying to duck and evade and postpone, but I can't it won't let me. So let's reconcile that question for just a moment. Let's simplify that question. What is bigger? And I'm going to softball this, you guys. What is bigger? The spirit that animates the universe, or my little rinky-dink problem with booze and drugs and whatever brings us to this all-inclusive study. You know what I mean? My little crack problem? Or God, the spirit of the universe, that which has created mountains, solar systems, planets, oceans. Me or my little problem or that? And so that's me softballing it. What is bigger? And you see, I can't come to rooms like this with people like you and people who have recovered and deny that there is a power that is alive, that works. I don't know what it is. I haven't had experience with that power. You see, the word understand in my 1930s dictionary means to know through experience. And at step 2, I'm not going to have an understanding because I'm not going to have experience, deep experience. But can I believe that this power that I don't know, I don't understand, I haven't defined, I can't comprehend, could this power be bigger than the obsession of the mind? Could it be bigger than the thought that I have that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink drug compulsive behavior? Is that possible? But then I believe it asks a question, and oh boy, it's a big one. It's a big one. God is everything, or else God is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? And here is how I reconcile that question. And honestly, if you're having trouble reconciling it, you take Terry's suggestion, watch for God. I promise you will see God. But if you're here in the here and now, we can rely on our own experience. So what I will do is I will ask, and I'll stop the share. I will ask, is there anyone here who has had that experience where you are alive and sober today based only on seconds and inches? Seconds that you did not earn, inches that you did not deserve. We are alive and we are sober today based on those seconds and inches. Is it possible? Is it possible that there is a power that was involved in that? Is it possible? And then let's take a moment. And I have a feeling if you're hanging out with Terry and I, pew pew, yeah, right? But let's take a moment and just think back to any moments where you have had a sense of presence. You know, where there's a calm and a peace that has come over you, that is not you. You know, I live right by the Rocky Mountains, and if you've ever been out this way, you know what it's like to drive out and the majesty of the mountains, it comes over you. You know what I'm saying? Is it possible? That moment, man, that moment holding a newborn in your eyes and in your arms, and you see the universe in their eyes, that experience. Have I had any experience of presence, of oneness, of a peace and a serenity that is not my own, that came over me, or the ability to, you guys know what I'm saying? Any moments of that? Any. And if I have had even one moment like that, or by seconds and inches, I should not be here, then I cannot say God is nothing, because my own experience proves that. God cannot be nothing. God isn't. And that means this power is. And if this power is, that means this power is everything. And I won't screen share this, but I'll toss it in the chat. You know, when Terry's talking about Terry, I know I gotta get you another sticker made so you have a copy. But I made this little design, and part of why I did it is a sponsee of mine actually took the picture, and then I made it a little fancy. But when I was working with that sponsee, when I was working with that sponsee, it was a beautiful autumn, and we don't have those where I live. 4 seasons? Mm-mm. Some of the Calgarians, y'all know, we don't got 4 seasons. We got winter and road construction. That's what we got. That's what we got. So it was a beautiful like September, an amazing October. And so we were sitting outside. And before I work with my sponsees, we always start with a prayer, and we would hear the call of this bird, the northern flicker. And we kind of became this joke that, oh, God's here, God's here. And it became a sign of, yes, absolutely, moments of clarity. And yes, I will answer some of those questions about e-signatures and stuff. Yep, I'll get you after the meeting. Absolutely, I got you. But it was one of those things where, man, we would be out there, we would be praying, and we'd see a northern flicker, and it started as a joke, but we were like, ah, God's here. So the presence of this bird became the sign for the presence of God. And keep in mind, you might be like, Paige, God's not in a bird. That's stupid. And fair enough, but absolutely, God's in a bird. God is everything, and the presence of God. And part of why I like birds is I know you guys are aware, I have some problems with my attention. It's a little deficit, at times perhaps hyperactive. Tangents Anonymous, Derry and I. And what happens is I see a bird and it brings my attention back to the present moment. And that is one of the places God can be found, in the here and now. And so what happens is we start praying and we see this bird, and it becomes like a theme for us. And there's one day we were sitting and we were doing some work, and we were at the end of, like, near the end of the 12 steps, and I think we were reading to employers and talking about some of the amends he had left to make. And we see this northern flicker, and man, how the light hit it. It was a beautiful, vibrant orange. And it was breathtaking. And my sponsor was like, you know what we should do? We should probably look up if there's any like spiritual symbology of the northern flicker. And I think it's like change or something. But he was looking it up on his phone, and as he was looking it up on his phone, a number was calling, and it was an unknown number. And I was like, or a private number, I can't remember. And I was like, you can answer it if you want. And he picks it up, and it was the police officer who had saved his life. You know what I mean? God is everything. Now, I won't go into too much detail about the second part of this story, or maybe I will. Actually, I'm feeling called to it, and I don't know why. I'd rather not, to be honest with you. That's how this works. A couple years ago, I sat with my uncle when he was in the hospital as he passed away. And he was a good man, and he died a horrific death. And it was heartbreaking. And it was devastating, and he went through things nobody should go through, and I bore witness to just just unbelievable suffering and agony. And I remember time after time after time when I was absolutely broken by life on life's terms. What I would look out is out the window, I would see again and again a northern flicker. And there's more to that story, but the symbology of that is God is as much with me in those moments of grace as much God is with me in the horror of whatever I'm going through. Do you know what I mean? God has not abandoned me when I'm in suffering. God is with me in that suffering. I might not feel like it, I might not know that, but that for me is the sort of symbology of that silly little bird. And just like Terry was saying, man, if I'm not watching for it, I'm not going to see it. Sometimes I mess with sponsees, and I'm like, when they're struggling with the conception of God, and I'm like, well, how many northern flickers did you see? Now, I am aware of their territorial range, so I'm not asking those in the UK. Or like, how many magpies did you see? And they're like, I don't know. And it's like, because we're not watching. But if I watch for it, I will see it. Now, we took that leap of faith and we explained how to go from bridge to shore. But what the book is going to do now is going to meet us in that confusion and meet us in that, how do I take this leap of faith? You see, this book is not expecting perfection. This book is meeting me where I'm at. And it says, arrived at this point, the point of God is everything, or else God is nothing. We were squarely confronted with the question of faith. I'm giggling because of the next line. This is so stupid. It's there, faith. Can we take that leap right now? Can we do it? And it says we couldn't duck the issue. And some of y'all know I love me some waterfowl. And genuinely, I have this thing with sponsees where I'm like, if you struggle with the idea that there could be a loving God, just remember the duck's feet are orange. They're orange. There's no need for that. That is whimsical as all heck. How could there not be a loving God? It's orange. Yeah. So I have this little picture of like duck feet that I sometimes send out, and it says, gentle reminder, God, which is like, God loves you. Duck's feet are orange. So we couldn't duck the issue. And it says, some of us have already walked over the capital B, capital R, bridge of reason. So when it's capitalized, we're pointing to synonyms for things that are God or things we have made God. And in this case, we have made our own logic. And yeah, Katie's got a cat paws, absolutely. We have used our own logic, our own reasoning as a higher power, my own intellect as God. And I've used that. We've used that to move across that bridge. To bridge to faith, right? Because what I've got isn't working and what you guys have does. I'm using logic to make that bridge. And it says, bridge of reason towards the desired shore of faith, the outlines and the promise of capital N, capital L, new land. So where we are going is somewhere brand new, somewhere we have not been before. That is where we are going. And that's because if I'm staying, like literally, if I stay where I'm at, I'm going to relapse. That's step one. I got to get somewhere new. And so we're seeing the promise of new land had brought luster to tired eyes. That's that light, that glow, that like shine to those tired, worn out eyes, and fresh courage to flagging spirits. There is new hope. And it says friendly hands stretched out in welcome. And that was your friendly hands. Those of you who have recovered, who says, man, there's an answer. There's a way out. There's a solution. Join us. Take that leap of faith. We were grateful that capital R, because I've been making it my God, reason had brought us so far. But somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. We couldn't quite take that last leap of faith. Perhaps we'd been leaning too heavily on capital R reason that last mile, and we didn't like to lose our support. So it's taken, how do we take that last little leap of faith? And the book's going to tell us. Over to Terry. Pew, pew, pew.
Thanks, Paige. That's great. Um, yeah, I mean, I mentioned it earlier. Uh, count how many times it says the words thinking, self, reason, intellect, ideas. This whole chapter is looking at our current agnosticism, our thinking. And they're showing us and they're tying it all into the next page that we were worshipers our entire lives. We worshiped the God of reason. We worshiped our thinking. And dude, self-will got me really far in life. Not downplaying it at all. It was the improper use of self-will that I was operating on. Here's a little thing for you guys to think. If God is everything, does that include self-will? Hmm. I'm just thinking about next week I'll have 6 years, and I'm like, what happens if I go and get my cake, and it's kind of like looking at my kid. He's about to turn 4 in August. They were all around him, he's about to blow out the candles, and we ask him, "How'd you do it? How'd you make it to 4 years old, buddy?" I was carried there. I was carried there. God is everything. I'm just awake to the fact right now. What we're doing is we're aligning our thinking with God. That's what our 10 step talks about. Align the will, align the thoughts, right? What we've been doing is we've been in disharmony. We've been off track. We're just getting back to harmony through this process. But first thing we got to look at is how we live life based on worshiping the God of reason. I love this line. It says, that was natural, but let us think. There's that word think again. Think a little bit more closely without knowing it. I love this line. Without knowing it, without even realizing it, without even being awake or aware to it, have I not been brought to a certain, what does it say? Brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith. Now think about that. Like I have faith that when I come on here onto this meeting and I put the password, I forgot the password, but if you put the password in, I have faith that I'm gonna log on. Or I have a password that's on my phone and I put my digits in, I have faith without knowing it, without realizing that I have faith that when I put the password onto my phone, I have access to my phone. I have faith that when I turn the water, the nozzle in my shower, that water is going to come out. I have faith that when I put my key into the ignition of my car, I don't have one of those electronic ones. I still gotta do the key thing. I still gotta, turn the key, the engine's gonna turn on. I got faith without knowing it. I believe that this is going to happen, right? Without even knowing it, when I say I put my key in the door, I know that my house key will open the door. Without even knowing it, I've been living on faith my entire life. This is how I've stood. I've stood based in the living of the world of the intellect for a very, very long time. But like I said, I never could reach from bridge to shore. I could never have this promise of a new land. I mean, think about it. You buy a new car, you're happy as pie for 2 weeks, and I'm driving that new car, and I'm like 2 weeks later, I'm like looking around like, damn, Terry, you're a piece of shit. No one likes you. No one complimented your share the other day. Right? What's up with, yeah, and that's me living up here without knowing it. Without knowing that I've been living in my thinking and listening to my thinking for such a long time. And they're showing that to us. So without having I been served that or did not we believe in our own reasoning? That's a question for us. Who believed in their own thinking? I did. Like work, these are things that I was taught to as well. Work hard, play hard. Work hard, get results. Do this, you get that, right? Study, you pass the test. You know, I don't know. I mean, did not I believe in my own reasoning? Yes, because it got me very, very far in life. It worked, but I could never step from bridge to shore for some reason. I could not just be, I could not sense this freedom that you guys are talking about when you came in here. A new sense of freedom, a new sense of peace. I didn't know that experience. I only felt whiplashes of it. I only felt moments of flickers of it because I kept going right back to here, an agnostically inclined individual, right? What else to say? Did not we have confidence in our ability to think? Is that word think? This is the 48th time it says the word think in the start of We Agnostics. Ask yourself, did you guys have confidence in your ability to think? Who thought they're the shit at work? Yeah, I mean, what do you have to teach me, Rook? You know, you know, who had the faith and confidence in their ability to think about a certain subject? Who thinks that they're an expert in something? I worked in the gym business for such a long time, and the top trainers in the world have trainers. Anyone know that? Yeah, right. Because they need someone to check them and have them set a new goal and keep growing, keep growing, keep growing. The thing is, I think I'm an expert. I think I'm a legend in my own mind. What do you have to teach me? Back the F up. Kind of like Bill's story, right? I fancy myself a leader, right? I mean, I was just this leader. I was this legend in my own mind. I was living in this world of make believe, right? I was living in the world of the intellect. I was living up here. I was not living here in the world of the spirit inside the heart. That's what we're doing. We're going from the head to the heart and operating from here. You guys ever hear that the most difficult path is from the head to your heart? I have a friend in California. He says the most difficult path is actually from your heart to or it's from your knees to the floor. That's what he said. How difficult it is it to get down on your knees and say, I don't know what to do anymore. I need help. There's a lot of fighting and scratching and crawling before you get down there, right? Because I got this. I know what to do. I, me, mine. Just like we talked about. You know, I'm gonna try and do this. I got this. I'm gonna do that a certain way because that's worked in the past. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. What was this but a sword of faith? Yes, we have been faithful. I have? Abjectly faithful. To who? To the God of reason. That's when and I've said this a few times the last time I've spoken. People, this I say, if you don't believe in God, yes, you do. Absolutely, you do. I believed in two gods prior to Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous. I believed in King Alcohol. Who believed in King Alcohol? Who believed that a drink would crush that loneliness inside and crush that insecurity, would make me grow 2 feet taller for some odd reason. Actually, could make me a better communicator as well. Who had faith in King Cocaine? Hell yeah. I don't know if it's laced with fentanyl, but I know it worked for me. Right? I know it. I had complete. You asked me to roll around like a little puppy and bark like a little dog for cocaine. I'll do it because I had complete faith in my thinking. Right? Yes, I've always been objectively faithful to some type of God. The problem is it was the wrong God. And here's the second one, the God of reason. That's what it's showing us, that we've been worshiping our whole life. This thinker up here, this liar up here, this talker that's up here. The main problem the alcoholic and the addict centered in his mind rather than in his body. That's why in the 10th step it says to watch for the manifestations of self, like resentment, fear, dishonesty. It does not say we continue to listen to the manifestations of self. Who likes to listen to their fears? Damn, I'm not the only one. Okay. Yeah, I love listening to my fears. I love listening to my guilt. I like listening to my shame. I like listening to my dishonesty. I like listening to the story in my head. The problem with that is there's no God there. I'm just operating in within my head, and no wonder why I had no fresh experience and new experience with anything because I was living up here. Most people are asleep. 12 step says having had a spiritual awakening. That means we've been asleep. I've been sleeping for such a long time. And I look at people and they're sleeping too. And I wish I could just shake people up. Like, come on, join us. I told you guys the other day, I tried getting my wife to join the Rocketing into the Fourth Dimension Club. She's like, I'm about to rocket my fist into your face. You know, then people don't like it. Most people like to live by what? Self-propulsion, right? I got a friend. I'll shut up after this. I don't know why this came into my head. I have a friend that says, yes, faith without works is dead, but works without faith. They're kind of gearing us up that we need this. Because when you get to step 8, you have faith. But works without faith is self-propulsion, right? That's why I need a God in my life. And it says, so in one way or another, we discovered that we've had faith all along. What a mental state of goose flesh. All right, back to you, Paige. I just wanted to say that.
Oh, absolutely. Look at all these bird metaphors. I'm here for it. And so, yes, this is exactly what's happening. That spiritual judo, where I'm saying reason, 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 and let's have a look at what we're doing with reason and see, flip it, and we see that we have faith. Now, I have a hard time having naps. This is a weird tangent, but it's on point, I promise. I don't nap well. I'm somebody who deeply and desperately wants to nap well, but I don't nap well. So I often have to have an audiobook on. And I was listening to this audiobook about the philosopher Mennonites. And he had this quote, and I think he was quoting Plato, but he might have been quoting Socrates. And the quote was, that logic is the cannon that can blow apart and differentiate the true from the false, which is true for not us. Not us. Because how many times have I used my logic and my reason to try to play the tape to the end, to try to think through the consequences, to try to just don't do it? You know what I mean? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And see, I'm worshiping this thinking, and the thinking is what takes me back time and time again to the first drink, drug, hoot, hit, compulsive behavior, what have you. I'm worshiping my reason, and my reason's getting me loaded. And I have no problem with that. But here's the thing. If you are here today and you're not sure whether or not you have the capacity for faith, I've got a little test. It's not in the book, but I got a little test. And here's the test. If you are unsure about whether or not you could have faith, Anyone here ever taken a floor pill? If you're not sure what that is a pill that you found on the floor. Anyone here ever popped one of those? Yeah. All I'm saying is if you popped a floor pill, girl, you got faith. You can write that inventory, no problem. I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to throw this out there. Anyone here ever taken a car floor pill? That's a pill that you found on the floor of a car. You can make amends. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Have you done that? And I'll do another one. Anyone here ever get back with your ex? Oh boy, what a sort of faith. It'll be different this time. You know what I'm saying? Woo, I got faith. It is not the quantity of faith that is lacking, it is the direction through which I am orientating it. I got faith. And just as like Terry was saying, I came to alcohol, to crack cocaine, to pills, to the X with absolute faith that it could relieve from me how I was feeling. You see, faith had been involved the whole time. I live by my life by faith. It goes on to say, we found too that we had been worshipers. So not even do I have faith, I'm worshiping. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. That's the goosebumps, the little tinglies. And also, if you think like Paige, you're not tough. Well, I have hand-fed Canadian geese. And if you know Canada geese, you know that that is where our nation's hate goes. We channel it into those aggressive geese. And so I will hand feed those bad boys. So don't mess with me. That's my most intimidating fact. If you're like, oh, Paige, she's so tough, she will feed a goose by hand and want to love it. Anyway, focus. Sorry, we don't have a lot of time. I gotta hurry. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves. See, just as like Terry was saying, I have no problem with God. You see, God is a title. I'm looking for the power beyond the title. You see, I have made people God in my life. Codependence? I know. There's no codependence in this meeting. Maybe maybe the people is your boss. Maybe the people is your parents and getting their validation. Maybe, you know what I mean? Have I made people God in my life? I know I have. And then sentiment. So these ideas or these memories back in the day or these things in my life that don't carry any weight, these ideals that I can't live up to. And then when it says things, the new car, the new phone, the new job, money, have I made money my higher power or ourselves and my ability to reason and to think? And also one of the things I forgot to point out is when it talks about we had been abjectly faithful to the God of reason, I wanted to point out the word abjectly means terrible and allows no hope. So I am faithful to something that is destroying the hope in my life. And if I look at the things that I made God in my life, the validation, the likes, I was never on Twitter, but the retweets, the money, the job, the relationship, the attention, the approval, the affection, I have made those God. And it lasts only an instant. You know that saying, if instant gratification is so good, why does it only last an instant? You say, I'm after it, but there's no depth, there's no substance. But I had no problem worshiping at the altar of these things, worshiping at the altar of drugs or alcohol or whatever brings you to this study. And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower, you know, those moments in nature where it takes our breath away and we are one. Who of us had not loved something or somebody? If you have children or you're babysitting them, you get an inkling of why hamsters sometimes eat their young. It doesn't matter whether it's the twos or they're terrible 22s. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, yeah. And actually, who of us have not loved something or somebody? How much should these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw it last. I'm going to share with you an experience. And I think Terry and I, we're going to go a little over today. Not a whole bunch, but I'm looking at what we got left. I'm looking at the words coming out of my mouth, and I want Terry to have 10 too. So we're going to go a little bit over. But here's my experience. If you know what it's like to have kids, and I don't have kids, I'm just an auntie. But you know, when you got them and they're in their terrible twos or their terrible 22s, and they have been on your last nerve all day, all day, and they're just not listening. Doesn't matter if they own their own business, they're not listening, and they're just on your last nerve all day. And go to bed. You know, I'll get you 36 cups of water, 42 stories, 86 potties. Like, let's go, 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 go to bed. And then you put them to bed, and you just, I mean, literally on your last nerve all day. And then you put them to bed. And they're finally asleep. And you go and you sit down on the couch or on the sofa, and you have that moment of, oh, but then it's quiet. It's a little too quiet. Then you go back to their room and you open the door quietly, because we're not insane, but quietly. We open the door and we just watch them sleep, you know? And I just think if that is the capacity for love that we have, man, we are not doing better than God in the love department. So imagine on your worst days that God is opening the door and just it's just loving you just as much on your tough days as your good days. That is the capacity for love that we get awakened to. And it says, how much of these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing. We saw it last. But, and it doesn't say but I'm going to throw out, but were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? When you look back in at your life and the memories that you had, your greatest memories, I guarantee you did not plan. And the moments that you remember were not moments where, well, that was a good investment decision, and what a logical choice that was. It is these moments of presence, of love, of connections that you couldn't have planned or made. And it said, did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? And tell that to a teenager that starts dating. It's not logical, you know. But mom, I love him. No, you don't. Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say that we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. We can't say we don't have those things. We do. Our very lives is evidence that we have the capacity. It is just the direction with which we need to orientate them. It says, in one form or another, we've been living by faith and little else. Over to Terry. Pew, pew.
I'm saying that faith is part of our basic makeup. It's where we're putting our faith or where we're putting our energy to. You know, we sought, I mean, who is worship people? You know, I mean, look at your current experience with that. Meet the book where you're at. Who have you worshiped that is a person in your life? Oh, my boss. That's someone I worship, or someone who's a coworker of mine. I'm just giving you my current experience, right? Like he did really well on this. It's called a truck rodeo today. So we had plow trucks and with a wing, and we go around. And I got more time than him, but he kicked my ass, and I worshiped this guy. I wanted to be this guy. That energy was towards that. I was seeking something. So I mean, think about all this energy that we're putting towards seeking people, places, sentiments, money, ourselves. Imagine putting that energy into a power grid in ourselves. The sky's the limit. I mean, who is worship things? Money. Who's worship money? That's a big one. What about what else to say? Who's worshipped ourselves? Look at that stuff and look at your current experience, and then look how it kind of transfers over, right? Well, what about when we see like a moonlit light or a sunset or something like that? I don't know exactly where it is. Yeah, I can't. It goes from thinking to feeling. As it says right here, wasn't this? We're in these things, the tissue. Something's a tissue that could easily rip. I mean, no wonder why people tell us not to get in a relationship in the first year. We start worshiping that other person, and what happens if that power fails us, which it will? I get upset and I get disturbed and I want to get high. I want to drink. See, there's all these things that I'm worshiping, but not a power greater than myself. Yeah, I'll shut up right there, Paige. I think we're done. I'm done. I'm
Awesome.
finito.
Benito. All right, I'll stop the recording and we can wrap up with the Serenity Prayer.